The penthouse suite of the Grand Royal Hotel screamed luxury. Every inch of it, from the velvet drapes to the gold-trimmed furniture, dripped with the kind of wealth most people could only dream of. And, right in the middle of it all, lounging on a designer couch with a glass of the finest whiskey in hand, was Victor Langston, a self-made millionaire. At least that's what he liked to tell people. The truth? His father's connections had opened doors for him, and his mother's wealth had cushioned every fall. But Victor never mentioned that part. Tonight, he was hosting a small party, just a handful of elite guests, business moguls, and influencers. The laughter was loud, the arrogance even louder. Expensive perfume and cigars filled the air as they exchanged stories about their latest investments, private jets, and exclusive getaways. To them, money wasn't just power. It was everything. And then she walked in. Margaret. She was the hotel's longest-serving maid, well into her 60s, with tired eyes that had seen decades of wealthy guests come and go. Her uniform, though neatly pressed, had begun to fade with age, just like the way people looked at her, as if she were invisible. But she wasn't. Not to everyone. Margaret had cleaned up after celebrities, politicians, and royalty, yet she had never been treated with less dignity than she was tonight. Victor barely glanced at her as she quietly went about tidying the room, picking up discarded napkins and empty glasses. But when she accidentally bumped into the coffee table, sending a few drops of whiskey spilling onto his expensive Persian rug, the room went silent. Victor set his glass down slowly, his expression turning cold. "Do you have any idea how much this rug costs?" His voice was low, controlled, but dripping with condescension. Margaret immediately bent down to wipe it, her hands trembling. "I'm so sorry, sir. It won't happen again." The room erupted into laughter. "Oh, don't bother," one of Victor's friends sneered. "That stain probably costs more than her entire year's salary." Victor smirked, shaking his head. "It's fine. She's used to cleaning up messes. That's what she does, isn't it?" More laughter. Margaret swallowed hard, keeping her head down. She had been humiliated before, but something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way Victor looked at her. Not like a person, but like an inconvenience. She stood up, forcing a polite nod. "Excuse me, sir. I'll be out of your way soon." Victor chuckled, leaning back. "Oh, take your time, Margaret. Who knows? Maybe one day, if you work hard enough, you'll afford a rug like this." This time, even some of his friends shifted uncomfortably. But no one said anything. Margaret finished quickly, her steps quiet as she exited the room. But just before the door closed behind her, she paused, just for a second, as if she knew something Victor didn't. Then, without a word, she was gone. The party continued, but the energy had shifted. Victor, however, paid no mind. He was at the top of the world, untouchable. Or so he thought, because the next morning, at exactly 8 a.m., a knock on a suite door would change everything. The knock echoed through the suite, sharp and deliberate. Victor groaned, pulling a pillow over his head. His skull throbbed from the night before. Too much whiskey, too much laughter, and just enough arrogance to keep the world spinning in his favor. Another knock, more forceful this time. Victor exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples as he sat up. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow over the mess left behind. Half-empty glasses, expensive cigars, and crumpled napkins scattered across the marble coffee table. The scent of stale liquor still clung to the air. He wasn't expecting anyone. Dragging himself to the door, he barely glanced at his reflection in the grand mirror by the entryway. His silk robe hung loosely over his shoulders, his hair still tousled from sleep. He wasn't worried. Whoever it was would wait. People always waited for him. When he finally swung the door open, his confidence wavered. Standing in the hallway was a man in a sharp navy suit, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. He wasn't hotel staff. No name tag, no polite smile. Behind him, a second man, older, with a stern face, watched in silence. Victor narrowed his eyes. "Can I help you?" The first man didn't flinch. "Mr. Langston?" Victor leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. "That depends on who's asking." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black wallet, flipping it open to reveal an official-looking badge. Ethan Carter, private investigator. He let the word settle before adding, "We need to have a word." Victor's smirk flickered. "A private investigator? What is this, some kind of joke?" Carter remained calm. "This isn't a joke, Mr. Langston. May we come in?" Victor hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who let people into his space unless they were handpicked, and these men weren't on the list. Still, something in Carter's gaze unsettled him. With an exaggerated sigh, he stepped aside. "Fine, but make it quick." The two men entered, taking in the extravagant suite without a hint of admiration. Carter's partner, who had yet to introduce himself, closed the door behind them, locking it quietly. Victor's irritation flared. "All right, what's this about? Because if you're here for a donation, you're wasting your time." Carter ignored the remark. "We have a few questions regarding Margaret Willis." Victor frowned. The name was familiar, but it took a second for his still groggy mind to catch up. Then it clicked. The maid. His expression relaxed. "Oh, her. What, did she complain about me? Is this some hotel protocol nonsense?" Carter studied him, as if deciding how much patience he had. "When was the last time you saw her?" Victor scoffed. "Last night. She cleaned up after my guests and left." End of story. Carter's partner finally spoke, his voice gravelly. "Are you sure about that?" Victor's irritation turned into something else. A quiet discomfort. "Yeah, I'm sure." "Why?" Carter took a step closer. "Because Margaret never clocked out last night." The words didn't make sense at first. Victor blinked, his usual confidence slipping. "What are you talking about?" Carter didn't look away. "She was seen leaving your suite, but after that, nothing. No security footage of her exiting the building. No records of her returning to staff quarters. Just gone." Victor let out a short, humorless laugh. "So what? You think I have something to do with that?" Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a small notepad from his coat pocket. "Mr. Langston, witnesses say you publicly humiliated her last night." Victor waved a hand. "Oh, come on. That was nothing. A joke. People laugh, people move on." Carter's partner wasn't smiling. "Not everyone moves on, Mr. Langston." Victor felt his stomach tighten, but he forced his usual arrogance back into place. "Look, she's an old woman. Maybe she just left without telling anyone. Maybe she quit. Maybe she—" Carter cut him off. "Do you know if she had any family?" Victor hesitated. "How would I know that?" Carter flipped a page in his notebook. "Margaret Willis worked at this hotel for 35 years. She was one of the most respected employees here. Guests and staff alike knew her." He looked up. "But you? You never even noticed her, did you?" Victor shifted uncomfortably. He didn't like the way Carter spoke to him, like he was some kind of suspect. "Listen, I don't know where she is. And honestly, I don't care. She's just a maid." Carter's partner exhaled sharply through his nose, like he was holding something back. Carter, however, remained calm. "One more thing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "This was found tucked under your suite door early this morning." Victor took it reluctantly, unfolding it with a frown. The handwriting was uneven, almost rushed. "Be careful, Mr. Langston. Some debts are paid in ways you don't expect." His chest tightened. "What is this?" He looked between the two men. "Some kind of prank?" Carter's eyes didn't leave his. "We don't think so." Victor's fingers curled around the note. For the first time in years, a strange sensation crept into his chest, something unfamiliar. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Victor's fingers twitched as he stared at the note, the words twisting in his mind like a slow-moving storm. "Some debts are paid in ways you don't expect." What kind of nonsense was this? A joke? A threat? His suite was locked. No one should have been able to slip anything under the door. And yet, here it was. He crumpled the paper in his palm, forcing a smirk. "You seriously think this has something to do with me?" Carter didn't blink. "We don't assume, Mr. Langston. We investigate." Victor scoffed. "Then investigate someone else. Margaret's a grown woman. If she wanted to leave, she left." Carter exchanged a glance with his partner. "And if she didn't?" Victor stiffened. "What are you saying?" Carter didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a slow step forward, lowering his voice. "Do you know what Margaret did before she worked here?" Victor frowned. "She cleaned rooms. What else would she do?" Carter studied him for a moment, then shook his head. She wasn't always a maid. She was a nurse. A damn good one, too. Used to work in one of the best hospitals in the state. Victor's smirk faltered. And Carter continued, something happened. A mistake, a cover-up, depends on who you ask. But she lost everything. Her job, her home, her reputation. That's how she ended up here. Victor folded his arms, unimpressed. So, people have pasts. What does that have to do with me? Carter's partner finally spoke. You're not as untouchable as you think, Mr. Langston. Victor's pulse ticked faster. What's that supposed to mean? Carter slipped his notebook back into his coat. Margaret was careful. She kept records, notes on the people she worked for. Some say she had a habit of remembering things that others wanted to forget. He let the words settle before adding. She knew things about the guest who stayed here. Things that could ruin lives. Victor clenched his jaw. You're trying to scare me. Carter tilted his head slightly. Are you scared? Victor forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. Of a maid? Please. Carter's partner exhaled through his nose again, a slight shake of his head, like he'd already made up his mind about the kind of man Victor was. Then Carter took out a small evidence bag and held it up. Inside was a hotel keycard. This was found near the back exit of the hotel early this morning, he said. It was registered to your suite. Victor's breath caught. He hadn't lost his key. It was right on his nightstand where he left it. That's impossible. Carter's gaze sharpened. No, Mr. Langston. What's impossible is a woman vanishing without a trace after leaving your room. Victor's throat felt dry. His usual confidence was slipping, cracking at the edges. He stopped himself. He wasn't about to defend himself against a crime that didn't even exist. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. All right, this has been fun, but I think we're done here. If you want to waste your time looking for a woman who probably quit and left town, be my guest. But I have a life to get back to. Carter held his stare for another long moment before finally tucking the evidence bag away. We'll be in touch. Victor didn't watch them leave. Instead, he slammed the door the second they stepped out, his pulse hammering. He turned around, rubbing his temples, trying to shake off the uneasy weight pressing down on his chest. This was ridiculous. Margaret was a maid. A nobody. People like her didn't just disappear unless they wanted to. And that note? It had to be some prank from one of his so-called friends. Probably a leftover joke from last night. He grabbed his phone off the counter, scrolling through his messages. Nothing unusual. But then, his thumb hovered over his call log. There. A single outgoing call at 2:43 a.m. Victor's heart slammed against his ribs. He didn't remember making a call. He had been asleep. Or at least he thought he had been. He clicked the number, and his stomach twisted when he saw it was the hotel's front desk. Why would he call them in the middle of the night? His fingers felt stiff as he redialed. After a few rings, a polite voice answered. Grand Royal Hotel, front desk. How may I assist you? Victor swallowed hard. Yeah, this is Victor Langston. I think I called last night. A brief pause. Then, yes, Mr. Langston. You requested a driver at 2:45 a.m. Victor felt a chill slip down his spine. A driver? Yes, sir. You asked for a private car to be sent to the back entrance. It arrived at 2:50 a.m. His mouth went dry. And did I take it? Another pause. Sir. Victor forced himself to breathe. I'm asking if I got into that car. A longer pause this time. Then the receptionist said carefully, Sir, I wasn't on shift, but according to our records, the driver waited for 15 minutes. No one showed up. Victor felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. None of this made sense. He didn't call for a car. He didn't go to the back entrance. And yet, his phone said otherwise. The note crinkled in his fist. Some debts are paid in ways you don't expect. A sharp knock suddenly rattled the door again, cutting through his spinning thoughts. Victor jumped. His pulse pounded. He turned, staring at the door like it might burst open on its own. Another knock. Firm, unrelenting. His breath caught. He wasn't sure he wanted to open it. Victor hesitated, his hand hovering just inches from the door handle. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, each knock feeling louder than the last. Whoever was on the other side wasn't going away. A cold sweat broke across the back of his neck. He had dealt with high-stakes business meetings, ruthless investors, even public scandals. But this was different. This was something he couldn't control. Swallowing hard, he finally grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. Victor blinked. His pulse still raced, but there was nothing there. No one standing in the dim hotel corridor. No shadow disappearing around the corner. Just silence. Then his gaze dropped. At his feet was another folded note, identical to the first. His fingers trembled slightly as he bent down and picked it up. He unfolded it slowly, his eyes scanning the message. "You don't remember, but you were there." Victor's breath hitched. His stomach clenched. This had to be a joke. Someone was messing with him, trying to get in his head. But the problem was, it was working. He shut the door fast and locked it, running a hand through his hair. His reflection stared back at him in the suite's large mirror. Except he barely recognized himself. His usually sharp features were lined with tension, his skin paler than normal. He turned away, gripping his phone again. He needed answers. His fingers hovered over Carter's number, but he hesitated. What was he supposed to say? That he had received another creepy note? That someone was playing mind games with him? The police would think he was losing it. Instead, he scrolled through his phone, searching for something, anything, that could explain the missing time. His call log showed the request for the car, but nothing else. His messages were normal, his emails untouched. Then something made him pause. His photos. His thumb hovered for a second before he clicked the app. A fresh wave of unease rolled over him as he scrolled past pictures from business meetings, charity events, and vacations. But then, at the very end of his gallery, was a photo he didn't recognize. A photo taken at 2:47 a.m. Victor's breath caught as he clicked on it. The image was dark and grainy, but he could make out the inside of a car. The back seat, a reflection in the window, showed his own face, tired, unfocused. And beside him, Victor's stomach lurched. Margaret. She was in the car with him. His mind reeled. How? Why? He had no memory of this. He had woken up at his suite alone. But this photo, this undeniable proof, said otherwise. A ringing noise filled the room, and Victor jumped. His phone vibrated violently in his hand. Unknown caller. His fingers were clammy as he answered. Hello. Silence. Then a whisper, a voice just barely audible over the static. You left her. Victor's blood ran cold. He swallowed, his throat dry. Who is this? The line crackled. You were supposed to help. Victor's grip tightened. Help who? Margaret. A low breath on the other end. Then, a final chilling message before the line went dead. She's still waiting. Victor pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen. His hand shook. He didn't believe in ghosts, in curses, in any of that ridiculous nonsense. But this wasn't normal. This wasn't something he could explain away with logic. Margaret was gone, and somehow he was involved. He needed to find out what happened. The hotel had security cameras. They had to have footage of the back entrance of the car, of him and Margaret. If the police weren't going to put the pieces together fast enough, then he'd do it himself. Without wasting another second, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. But just as he reached for the handle, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. No number. Just words. Check the basement. Victor's pulse skyrocketed. The hotel didn't have a basement. At least, not one the guests were supposed to know about. Victor's fingers tightened around his phone as he reread the text. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Check the basement. A wave of nausea twisted in his gut. The hotel wasn't supposed to have a basement, at least not one guest knew about. But that didn't mean it didn't exist. He thought back to the architecture of the building, an old luxury hotel, renovated several times over the decades. Places like this always had secrets, spaces that weren't meant for the public. He hesitated for only a moment before making his decision. If he wanted answers, he had to go. Slipping his phone into his pocket, Victor grabbed his key card and left the suite. The hallway was eerily quiet, the plush carpet muffling his steps as he made his way toward the service elevator. The regular guests wouldn't notice it. It blended into the wall, unmarked and discreet. He had only spotted it once, years ago, when he had first started coming here. His fingers trembled slightly as he pressed the call button. The light above the doors flickered, and with a low groan, the elevator arrived. He stepped inside, glancing at the panel. There was no button labeled basement, just the regular floors from the lobby to the penthouse. Victor exhaled slowly. Whoever had sent that text knew something. They weren't just messing with him. His eyes scanned the panel again, searching for anything out of place. Then he noticed it, faint scratches near the button for the first floor. Almost like someone had pried something open. Without thinking, he pressed it and held it down. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the elevator shuddered. A quiet beep sounded, and suddenly, the lights inside dimmed. The doors slid shut, and instead of stopping on the first floor, the elevator began descending, lower than it was supposed to go. Victor's breath came faster. He was really doing this. The ride was slow, the air thick with something he couldn't name. When the doors finally opened, he stepped forward cautiously, his shoes tapping against cold cement. The basement was nothing like the luxury of the hotel above. The walls were old brick, the air damp and heavy. Dim, flickering lights lined the ceiling, barely illuminating the space. Victor's stomach twisted. He wasn't alone. Somewhere in the darkness, he could hear movement. A scuff of a shoe. A faint inhale. He turned his head sharply, scanning the shadows. "Who's there?" His voice came out steady, but inside his nerves were fraying. Silence. Then, from the far end of the room, a whisper. "You weren't supposed to come back." Victor's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't unfamiliar. It wasn't Margaret's either, and that terrified him more. His heart slammed against his ribs. He took a slow step forward. "Who are you?" A figure shifted in the darkness, stepping into the dim light. Victor's breath caught. It was Carter, his best friend, his lawyer, the one person he had trusted to handle everything. Except Carter didn't look surprised to see him. If anything, there was something unreadable in his expression, a calm that didn't match the situation. Victor's mind raced. What the hell is going on? Carter tilted his head slightly. "I was going to ask you the same thing." Victor's jaw clenched. "Don't play games with me. I got the messages. I know Margaret was with me that night." He took a step closer. "What happened to her?" Carter exhaled slowly, almost like he was disappointed. "You really don't remember, do you?" Victor's pulse pounded. "Remember what?" Carter didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Not his own. Victor's stomach dropped. It was Margaret's. The screen was cracked, the edges scuffed. Carter turned it toward him, the display lighting up as he pressed play on a video. Victor's breath hitched. It was him, in the car, with Margaret, and he was shouting. The video was shaky, but the audio was clear. His own voice, raw with frustration. "You think I owe you something? You're nothing. Just a maid. Just some old woman who—" The video cut off abruptly. Victor staggered back. His own words echoed in his head. He didn't remember saying that. He didn't remember any of this. But the proof was right in front of him. His hands curled into fists. "Where is she?" His voice was hoarse now, desperate. Carter stared at him for a long moment before slipping the phone back into his pocket. Then he said something that made Victor's entire body go cold. "She never left the hotel." The room spun. Victor's breath came fast and uneven. His mind was unraveling, memories slipping through his fingers like sand. He had to find her. He had to know the truth. But deep down, a terrible thought crept in his mind. What if he already knew? Victor's breath came fast and uneven as Carter's words echoed in his head. She never left the hotel. The weight of those 5 words pressed down on him like a vice, squeezing every last bit of denial out of his mind. He wanted to believe this was some elaborate trick, some sick game Carter was playing, but deep down, something told him it wasn't. His hand shook as he stepped forward, his voice raw. "Where is she?" Carter didn't move. His expression was unreadable, but there was something unsettling in the way he looked at Victor, like he was waiting for him to figure out on his own. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. And then, like a switch flipping, something in Victor's mind snapped into place. A memory, blurry, fragmented, but real. The elevator, the rain, Margaret's voice, pleading, desperate, and his own, sharp with anger. "You don't get to judge me." His stomach twisted. He stumbled back a step, shaking his head. No, it couldn't be. Carter exhaled, his tone almost pitying. You were drunk, Victor. You don't remember what happened that night, because you didn't want to remember. Victor felt the room spinning around him. He tried to grasp at the edges of his thoughts, tried to separate truth from fear, but the past was bleeding into the present too fast. He clenched his jaw. Tell me what happened. Carter finally moved, turning toward the far end of the basement. A rusted metal door stood there, barely noticeable in the dim light. He walked toward it, then stopped just before touching the handle. You need to see for yourself. Victor's pulse thundered in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to turn around and never look back. But he couldn't. Not now. With shaking hands, he reached forward and pushed the door open. The room beyond was small and cold, the air stale. And in the center, covered by a sheet, was something that made Victor's stomach drop. His feet felt like lead as he stepped inside. The silence was deafening. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached down and pulled the sheet away. And there she was, Margaret. Her eyes were closed, her expression eerily peaceful, like she had just fallen asleep and never woken up. A strangled noise escaped Victor's throat. His legs buckled, and he barely caught himself before collapsing. His chest burned, his lungs forgetting how to work. No, 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 no. Carter's voice was quiet. She fell, Victor. Victor's head snapped up, his eyes wild. No, she fell, Carter repeated, because you pushed her. The words hit like a sledgehammer. The memory, the one he had been trying so hard to keep buried, came crashing back in full force. Margaret, blocking the elevator doors, her face tight with frustration. Victor, slurring his words, shoving past her. Margaret stumbling, her arms flailing. The sickening crack as she hit the floor. Victor sucked in a breath, the horror of it slamming into him all at once. His own hands went to his head, fingers digging into his skull like he could somehow claw the memory out. I didn't mean to. His voice was barely a whisper. Carter sighed. Maybe not. But you left her there, didn't you? Victor couldn't breathe. Carter's gaze hardened. You walked away, went back to your suite, passed out, and by the time someone found her, it was too late. Victor's whole body trembled. He wanted to deny it, wanted to fight it, but the truth was staring him in the face. He had done this. Carter took a slow step closer. I covered for you, Victor. Cleaned up the mess. Because I thought you'd feel guilty. I thought you'd wake up the next morning and remember what you did. But you didn't. You went on like nothing happened. Victor's stomach lurched. He wanted to vomit. He wanted to undo everything. But there was no undoing this. Tears burned in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Carter's expression darkened. Because I wanted to see if you would figure it out on your own. I wanted to see if there was even a shred of decency left in you. Victor shook his head violently. I know. A sudden, loud knock echoed from the hallway above. Victor froze. Carter didn't flinch. He only stared, as if he had been expecting it. The knock came again, louder this time. Victor's breath hitched. Then a voice. Firm. Cold. Mr. Lancaster, this is the police. We need to speak with you. Victor's blood turned to ice. His gaze snapped to Carter, panic flaring in his chest. What did you do? Carter's expression didn't change. He simply slipped Margaret's phone from his pocket and held it up. The screen was still cracked. But now, there was a video playing. The hotel security footage. The grainy, black and white recording of Victor shoving Margaret. His whole world collapsed in an instant. Carter's voice was calm. I did what should have been done that night. The knocking turned into pounding. Victor could barely hear anything past the roaring in his ears. Then, the door upstairs burst open, and everything went dark. The world blurred around Victor as the pounding in his chest drowned out every other sound. The voices, the heavy footsteps, the rustle of movement. Everything faded into a distant hum. His body refused to move, frozen in place as the officers stormed down the stairs. He barely registered the cold metal of the cuffs snapping around his wrists. It didn't feel real. None of it did. He was led upstairs, his legs unsteady beneath him. The bright lights of the hotel lobby were a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness of the basement. Guests whispered, staff members watched in shock, and cameras flashed as reporters outside caught sight of the scene unfolding. Victor had spent his entire life controlling the narrative, shaping the way the world saw him. But now he had no control at all. Carter stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching silently as Victor was taken away. There was no satisfaction in his face, no smug triumph. Just exhaustion, as if this wasn't a victory, just something that had to be done. Outside, the night air was sharp against Victor's skin. A sleek black car waited at the curb, its back door open. The officers guided him inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. For the first time in years, Victor was alone. Truly alone. The weight of everything settled onto his chest. The lies, the arrogance, the decisions that had led him here. It all crashed down at once, suffocating him. He could still see Margaret's face in his mind, the quiet kindness in her eyes, the way she had never once treated him as less than human, even when he had treated her like nothing. He had stolen her life, and now he would have to live with that. The car pulled away, and as the flashing lights of the hotel faded into the distance, Victor knew that the world he had built for himself, the empire, the wealth, the power, was gone. Carter watched the car disappear down the street, his shoulders sagging as he let out a slow breath. He had spent years carrying the weight of Victor's secret, trying to decide whether the truth was worth exposing. And now that it was out, he didn't feel the triumph he thought he would. Just relief. Inside the hotel, the staff whispered among themselves. Some were shocked. Others quietly muttered that it had been a long time coming. But there was one person who simply stood in silence, watching the door Victor had just been taken through. Margaret's daughter. She had been there all along, working quietly in the background, unnoticed by the man who had destroyed her mother's life. She had come looking for answers, for justice, for something that made sense of the pain she had carried for so long. And now, as she stood there, she realized that justice had found its way to Victor Lancaster on its own. A deep breath filled her lungs. It wouldn't bring her mother back. It wouldn't erase the years of loss. But it was something, and sometimes something was enough. The hotel returned to its usual hum of movement, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. People moved differently, as if a shadow that had loomed over them for years had finally lifted. Carter turned, heading for the exit. He didn't need to stay and watch the aftermath. The story was over, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could finally walk away. As he stepped out onto the street, the city stretched before him, alive, restless, full of possibilities. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of his mind, he hoped that Margaret had finally found peace. The night carried on, just as it always did. But for those who had been a part of this story, nothing would ever be the same.